Hello, and welcome to the Brand Storytelling live streams for September 30th, 2020. I'm Drew Parkhill. Thanks for being with us. These live streams air every Wednesday, and our mission is to deliver the most timely and relevant information for our community of brands and their storytelling partners. These shows are designed for you, so please let us know how we can best serve this community by suggesting future topics and guests that would help you now, as well as into the future. You can drop me a line. I'm Drew at BrandStorytelling.tv. Excited to welcome this panel. Go ahead and turn your cameras on, guys, and join us here. I'm going to be handing it over to Ty Braswell, who's going to be our host for this show as we dive into this story with Picture Farm, Adidas, and Studio IB. Take it away.
Thanks, Drew. Well, I have to say, if you're getting ready to watch what you think is the typical sort of panel here, get ready for a lot of surprises and a lot of in-depth knowledge. And I've had the grand opportunity prior to this, we always do a little bit of rehearsal, and I got a taste of what's going to happen here. And this is a really extraordinary story about brand storytelling. So I'd like to get things kicked off by, I'm going to have each of our panelists introduce themselves, say their name, the company they work with, and then we'll dive deep into how this project got started. Jose, if you could start first.
Cool. Hi, everyone. Although I don't see anyone other than the guys in the panel with me. I'm Jose Cabasso, and I'm at Adidas as a global concept storytelling director. Yeah, that's what I do, coming from advertising into the brand side, still telling stories both ways.
My name is Ibrahim Hassan. I'm a freelance creative director and worked with a variety of clients over the years, and really excited to be here to talk about our topics.
My name's Ben Friedman. I'm over here at Picture Farm. I'm a partner at Picture Farm. We are a production company. We were lucky enough to get the call from Jose and Ebe to get involved in this particular project. It's something that we'd actually worked together back in 2015, the three of us, where we'd spent some time down in South America on a really extraordinary project, which was an altogether different story with an altogether different group and a different point of view, but it was the first chance that we got to work together, and actually I went on to work a lot with Ebe, and Jose went off and did his thing, and this was the first time we came back around all together. So when I got the call from Ebe about this one, and he said he'd been on the phone with Jose and they've been talking about this thing, and there was these shoe designers who were coming from all over the world to do this thing in Germany, and then Germany was going to go to Vietnam, and we were going to tell this story, and it was going to be this and that and the other. That was obviously something that was pretty exciting to me, because I was like, well, that's the story now. Let's see how that turns out. And so we started trying to piece together an approach, and it ended up being, I think we first started talking in maybe May, maybe April, and we ended up going out on the road in July and finished up the project in October.
Yeah, because as Jose was even telling me about the project, in my brain, I was still trying to connect the dots of what it was, what it is. And ultimately, actually, that kind of helped out. Sometimes leaving the brief a bit open so that we can kind of interject our own creativity into it helps beef up the brief in a beautiful way. So even as I was talking to Ben about I think we need some directors. We need some photographers. Maybe we need some illustrators. I'm not even sure yet, but what was good about the process is that the team was very it's not even about excitement. It's just everybody there was a collaborative spirit on how we were going about the project. And then when Jose, helped kind of streamline the process on and focus us, we were able to get a tighter brief on the idea of making sure that the collaborative partners all were makers and doers. And it wasn't necessarily about just getting a great photographer. Is, well, the photographer, what's his process? And you know, we worked with Jean Vincent Simonet, which you know, he's not only just a photographer, he takes the imagery and he manipulates it, and obviously a tactile using his hands, which is directly in relationship with the shoe designers and whatnot. And I'll let Jose kind of go through the entire landscape of the project. But what was very interesting and allowed an amazing creative outputting was the latitude to be able to take the process and then take it forward, and always knowing that it's going to change and ever change.
Yeah. So it pretty much started that way. Multiple cross calls between the three of us. But the project was okay. At Adidas, I work in concept storytelling, in creative direction. We work 2 years ahead of time. That's part of my job. At the moment in time where this happened, I was also leading the consumer-facing execution of Maker Lab, a platform for the brand to give opportunity to people to come co-create and be mentored and inspired and learn from people that have been doing footwear for a long time and work on stories around footwear creation. But these activations never have the outcome as a piece of footwear that it's complete, fully functional, tested, and even available for you to buy it. It's been until that moment in time very much about design exploration, not even a full pair, just one shoe. But the success and the desire and the appetite and the pressure that we were getting after doing 5 or 6 of these with no output that I could actually buy, we decided to try to make an experience where we would not only do the creative exercise of coming up with a shoe, but we would manufacture it and we would take it to market on a limited amount of pairs. And when we start thinking about these ambitions, the reality of footwear making is it takes time. It takes sometimes 3 years to even develop something from scratch, all the way to the simplest ones, 3, 4, 5 months. But we wanted to make this even more aggressive, and we had between starting the concept phase around the pieces of footwear all the way to go to market, we had somewhat 2 months to do everything. And when we started going after this, okay, we need first a set of creatives, like Ibrahim was saying, that is absolutely hands-on. They're not just thinkers, they are doers, they are people that can embark on this journey and create assets as they go, package them, design them, and that are of a mindset that is good to be operating on always on the move setup. You're now in your country, you're gonna come all together in the office headquarters in Germany. You're gonna spend there a week. You're gonna go to Vietnam. You're gonna spend a week at the factory. You're gonna come back to where you live. You're gonna go straight into editing room. You're gonna go straight into designing, laying out, art directing, all photo assets. You're gonna start working on music, soundtracks. You're gonna, like, everything was going to happen in this hyper mobility and geographic displacement, with some people being left behind. Myself being the one that never left Brooklyn and was always engaging at multiple time zones with the team on the ground. And so
you were there in spirit. You were there in spirit.
I was always in spirit, and I was sleeping well, which is good. uh,
So let me
so,
jump in. Let me jump in for 1 second, right? So you guys decide that you're going to find 3 makers that are small artistic entrepreneurs, not with a team of 100 people, not with a team with 10 people. Very 3 different, yet all 3 carry this very creative, eclectic idea about art and apparel. You take one of your classic, iconic shoes and challenge these 3 makers to ideate into something beyond their own current vision. And then you open up the most amazing amount of unlimited resources to make that happen. The smartest, most brilliant talent of your main headquarters in Germany for them to collaborate. And then going to Vietnam, where the shoes were actually being made. And then something like 288 people, if I'm not mistaken. There are only going to be 288 pairs. Did I get that right? 288? I think I got that right.
333 pairs of each one of the models.
Sorry, my bad. 333 pairs of each one of this interpretation of an iconic, classic Adidas shoe. And then, in addition to that, they were going to be sold with StockX. All the sneakerheads know about StockX, and that would be incredible if you had 3 years to do, but you guys did it in less than 3 months. And then all these other things happened: a 30-minute documentary, a special release event, all these different assets of different video cuts plus photography, a coffee table book. When the makers, you met them, did they have any idea that they were going to have, in essence, something like 100, 200 people helping them visualize something on a fast track that really no one had done before? I mean, what was it like when they realized, holy moly, I have this amount of resources, and literally it had to be over 100 people that touched that they interface with in some way or another. Talk about that for a second, because I think there's a tremendous amount of extraordinary elements to this project.
Yeah.
But that alone, and you didn't have 3 years to do it. You were trying to get it all done, start to finish, in 90 days.
Yeah. So, and for that, we need to be mindful of who we pick, right?
Right.
When we have a model like the Campus 80s that we wanted to recreate, revisit, redesign through the lens of these 3 different people with relevance in the culture of the campus itself, or sneaker culture in general, we also didn't want to pick people that we knew would probably land their take on campus in very close places in terms of resembling to each other. So we had to not only go after trying to create 3 shoes, but 3 shoes that we didn't know what were going to look like. And we knew we could anticipate that they would be ranging in levels of complexity depending on the designer. And we didn't have a lot of time to even test stuff. But when we embarked on that, we picked Helen Kirkham, amazing footwear designer, pushing the boundaries on the notion of what is a shoe and what it looks like and how much I can deconstruct and reconstruct it again. Recouture Shun from Japan, doing amazing work of hybridization and an excellent craftsman in shoemaking. And then Alex was one of the OG sneakerheads, transforming sneakers from back in the late 90s. So different people, different characters, different outputs that we could anticipate. We picked them and they knew everything about what it takes to make a shoe, right? They've worked in the industry, they've worked with footwear making. What they didn't know and they couldn't anticipate is how much the pressure of doing this that they know well in the context of the short amount of time that they have, and with a support system around them that they normally don't have access to, how much is this going to get in the way of them? And I can tell you some of them at times got paralyzed, because when you're working by yourself in your studio doing your piece of footwear, you're immediately setting parameters of achievability that are the ones you know you are able to achieve in your studio. When you are surrounded by other footwear designers at the brand, product development teams, then you get into the factories and you have the factory people that know the model inside out. They are just going to dump on you a world of possibilities that you had no idea you could try. And so that becomes that thing that when it's too much, and how much is me knowing that I can do all these things, it's gonna paralyze me. So it was really fun to see how they adjusted to that overwhelming amount of possibilities, which, you know, in some cases, final design of a product didn't even happen on the week that they had to sketch it. Some of the decisions about final shoe were just made on first round of samples already at the factory. So the opportunity to also give them that possibility, that is, it's okay to not be completely done with your idea. Let's test the few that you have at the factory and let the achievability there make a decision. That was something that they were not used to, right? So I think this for everybody, not just for them, but also for us, the ability to respond to the desires, the ability to satisfy their wishes, and use them also to push how we approach making shoes was amazing. So the whole thing, capping off on going to market on an IPO, on an event live, and this notion that everything that is happening that was being captured is not just making shoes, but making the content of the story they are going to tell, was pretty unique for everybody as an experience. Because even us, when we're documenting something, a story, it is about an already made product for most of the times, right? So we don't get to see the birth of, we don't get to capture the insights that make the decisions be one thing, not the other. So this whole process was an absolute exchange in overwhelming manner for all the participants, no matter where you sit, right?
So this begs the question. Everything was moving quite fast, not only for the makers that basically, you know, had lived in an environment where they had a limited amount of resources compared to what you gave. All the barriers to dream bigger than they ever imagined was realized. But for the three of you, I'd like you to go around the horn. Everything, again, moving quite fast and taking advantage of resources and really pushing it the limits and being incredibly creative, but at the same time being very cognizant of nurturing what it's like to work with makers. And just because you pick a maker doesn't necessarily mean that's it. It's just the beginning of setting up the right environment and having the right resources. Was there one thing, I'm going to go around the horn for each of the panelists. Was there one thing in particular that was the biggest surprise for you that you weren't expecting? Looking back, I mean, you had to move quite fast. You had to visualize every step of the process going forward. But was there any pleasant surprises that happened in that process, even whatever that may be? Because you all were able visualizing your expectations. But what were the surprises? Ben, want to jump in there? You got anything that was a big surprise to you?
I think what was really nice about how it worked out was that we were all part of a unit. So whether it was me who was producing the show, or whether it was Eve who was a creative director and a photographer, or whether it was, you know, any one of these guys, we were part and parcel of the movement towards the goal with the makers. You know, so we were all, there's something in documentary filmmaking where on the one hand, you're supposed to stay out of the way and just observe exactly how it is. With this, we couldn't do that. We were all part of this big push towards making it all happen. And there was really great synergies that were going on, and creativity that was being passed around, not just between the makers who had this incredible kind of rapport together and they supported each other in a way that was unbelievable. I mean, imagine these guys who, they're coming out and they're sitting in a conference room in the factory in Vietnam, and they're on the phone with the lawyers in Germany. So they've got their ideas and it's their baby, and suddenly the lawyer is like, you can't do it like that because of this, this, and this. And they're like, oh my God, what are we? And then suddenly, you know, somebody's going off and having a hug off camera because it's just all too much. But that's probably with, you know, the sound guy, you know. So it was super nice that kind of collegiate, you know, it was a convivial sort of general push. Everybody was part of this thing together. So I think that was a big part of it for me.
To echo those sentiments, the same, the collaborative spirit, but I think everybody individually had their own like little unlocks, you know what I mean? And I think for the creators, their unlock was when they hit their, you know, struggle point, you know, when they got back the sample and it wasn't exactly what they wanted. And for us, from a creator standpoint and a storytelling standpoint, it was like a very natural story arc play. In the beginning, everything was nice. They're sketching, they're doing this. And then they hit a moment where they feel great about everything. And then there's moments where they're, you know, doubting themselves. So it was like a really, I think everybody had their own individual unlocks. And from a collaborative standpoint, I mean, for myself, I was the creative director, yes, but I also shot, I drew some things, I made some things, and everybody else like followed that same spirit. You know, we all were creators in a sense, which is exactly what the brief was. And that's how all the creative partners were selected, is that they were all open to the idea of not only being collaborators, but to a certain extent, leaving your ego and trying new things. And it's okay if we fail a little bit, you know, I think that's part of the process. And that I think was the you know, and kudos to Jose for allowing us that space to be able to go in and try new things. And that's why the work looks the way it does, is because we were afforded the space to create.
Yeah. You know, were there any surprises? The biggest surprise for me is the final product of this. Yeah. I had no idea that it was going to look like this. So this is a fundamental difference when you are going into a shoot and you have a script and you have the location and you have the cast and you have the actions and you shoot, repeat, shoot, repeat. This has nothing to do with that. This is like, the only thing I knew is that we were going to document the creative process of 3 designers, manufacturing of that product, and document the journey to do so. 2 weeks packed. So the surprise, the intent was I wanted to do something that was a long form documentary. I didn't want this to become another sizzle video where you just get some exciting bits and bobs of something, but you never get to experience the roller coaster of the emotions of going through it. And I wanted this to be an opportunity for those that can't be a part of that, anyone that would view this, that could learn something about something that they're passionate about. So it's documentary slash tutorial on footwear design, asset creation, storytelling. It's all things at once. And for me, the only way that I could see myself sleeping well, like I was saying in the beginning, while not being on any of these locations while this is happening, is making sure that the people that are brought together, I knew for a fact, for past experience, that they would click together. I had no doubts about it. Not only they would click together, but they will build on each other's strength, and they would walk out of this experience friends. And that for me is the best thing to come out of this, not surprised that I was right. But I think the fundamental here, when you go out after this type of experiments, you need to create some groundings for safety and security, and making sure that you're not just rolling the dice here. You're just curating a group of people that you know are amazing at what they do. I've had amazing experience with each and every one of them, with the exception with Jean-Vincent Simonet. But even then, I knew that whoever this group of people that was the first line, Dan, Ibrahim, Leandro, Grand Army, Joey, the designers themselves, Helen, Shun, Alex, whoever they would suggest to something specific to what they were doing, I could blindly trust that they would bring something of the same nature of this cast of characters and personalities. And so with that, you can embark on something that it's just a line that says, we want to document the journey of three designers making shoes. How is it going to look like? We'll figure it out. We'll find out. And at week one, we are really happy with something that we know it's going to be changing dramatically week two, and it's going to be dramatically different from final product end of week three. So that for me was the biggest surprise, was to be very happy with not having known what I was getting into, and come out of it with an amazing story to tell.
I have a question. Do you think it changed the lives of those three makers? The impact?
I think it changed the lives of everybody. None of us had done something like this. For me, it was a tremendous crash course on the art of letting go, not being hands-on. I'm always hands-on, and I like to be in place and to just sit back and
Oh, wait a minute. I know your personality type. Okay, let me just ask your colleagues. Did he really let go?
See, the thing is, with me and Jose has so much trust, and that's what I was gonna was gonna interrupt. I was gonna basically say the success of this project was because there was blind trust. You know, like to me, I didn't really have a shot list. I created a shot list, but at the end of the day, the shot list was tell the story. Mm-hmm. That was the shot list, right? And so for me, I was just like, okay, I'm gonna tell this story. And Jose understands from my standpoint, if I'm going to tell a story, I'm going to go deep. That's just how I approach everything. So that trust was there. And honestly, the only time I think Jose really jumped in was when we got back and we had to like assess the content, because now he has to do his job of making sure that it's brand appropriate. It tells the story that it needs to tell, and that it, you know, basically answers the brief. And that's it. And for me, from a creator standpoint, I just have to make sure that I tell the most evocative story that I can.
So, do you think you would ever do this again in the same fashion? Would you pick 3 more makers and try this again?
I would do this for a living. Absolutely. I think this is, I've always loved working like this. And working like this sometimes with people for the first time, it's also much needed and necessary, because that's the only way you truly know people, and you know people not just from the work that you can see on a website portfolio, but the person that actually thinks about things a certain way, you get to witness by knowing them, getting to know them, and and doesn't need to be just the people you know, because that very rapidly turns in a collective or a random collective into something called an agency, where you know everybody inside out and you know what to expect, you know the limitations, where to push, but you don't necessarily get as surprised as when you surround yourself with a bunch of people that you don't know. And so the transition between knowing really well, not knowing, getting to know, adding to the roster of knowing really well, never stop going after getting to know more. That is really the only way I can think about going after anything, right?
One thing that's important actually is, you know, Jose and I have worked on many campaigns, and sometimes you get fixated with a creative partner. You're like, I love this person, I want to work with them. And you don't have the 3 or 4 conversations prior to going on to the project. And then sometimes it's a win, sometimes it's a loss, right? I think for something like this, it was really, really, really important that we vetted the creative partners. And because we knew this was going to be a partnership all the way through, you know, Ben and myself would have conversations with the photographers multiple times to make sure, what photographers or the director, whatnot, to make sure that when we piece the orchestra together, it's going to be like a unison, and it's not we're not going to have one person that's going to be like, I wish he or she was this. And that's ultimately, I was actually, if I think about like a surprise, I was surprised that literally every single one of us like were perfectly in harmony. It was super weird that like, I don't expect that, to be honest with you, you know, because we're all creatives. We have points of view. We have different ways of looking at things, different approaches and whatnot. But I think what we did is we all little by little, like let our egos sit, and we just looked at the bigger purpose on telling the 3 creator stories.
So there are a lot of people that are watching this now and have come to this because they want to not only have creative um, courage, but they also want to be able to sell that upstairs and to people that they answer to. Um, Obviously, the environment that you have at Adidas fosters that. But what wisdom can you share to the other brands that are out there watching this, that are hoping to aspire to recreate, you know, in their own, with their own environment, something similar to this? How can you, what can you share with them about how you sell that to the folks upstairs in the C-suite to be able to have this courage to be creative?
Well, first, I think you need to be of a very curious nature, but then to not just have that strong curiosity, but to have an equally strong drive to satisfy that curiosity. Because if you're just curious about seeing a lot of cool stuff, there's a million amount of cool stuff out there, and you just look at it and put it in a place of mood boarding your next project. What you're always going to find yourself trying to do is something that looks like this. If you're curious and you're really curious and you want to satisfy your curiosity, you are wanting to know how things are made to get there. So then you get more passionate about the approach more than you stay stuck on the outcome of that approach. Um, and fundamentally, you need to not only have strength on these 2 things, curiosity and satisfying it, but you need to be passionate about. And if you're not the most articulate, convincing person, make sure that you find ways to bring people in to help sell at the C-suite. Make sure that you, for example, show these types of conversations that happen in the industry among people behind certain projects and use that to your benefit. Make sure that you bring the outside in and don't try to do everything by yourself. The collective doesn't start and end at the moment you got the approval to go after a project and executing it. The collective starts in how do you surround yourself to drive a vision from its beginning, your vision from the beginning, inside the company, before you even start writing the brief.
So another question on this makes me think, what was the audience for this? There was clearly an audience
Kids
that
that
you
love
created on this.
sneakers, the design component behind it, and you know, love everything that has to do with sneakers in general. Like they are sports lovers as much as they are fashion lovers. This model is a model that we wanted to revisit, re-energize it. A model that started as a performance shoe in basketball, slowly and steadily moved out of the courts into skateboards, music, rock band concerts on the feet of the performers. And it became this transcendental from sport into culture type of model. So this is what makes shoes desirable, and different shoes, different desires, different people like different shoes. But we were talking to those that have a passion for the object itself, the histories that they carry, and then ultimately, you know, people that have a passion for design, for footwear design in particular, and that could appreciate understanding where did these guys started, because they know well the campus 80s, and where did they take and see when they look at it, the referencing that the designers had, and understand and accept and find it that it makes sense that it got here, whether it's because they recognize a very special personal signature from one designer, or there's a detail that has to do with the culture of where that designer comes from. So that's why we love sneakers. It's understanding these details, understanding the stories that the project carry, even before you see the documentary, even before you see the deep dive. So we were talking to these kids. There's a lot of them.
So had anyone ever in your industry ever tried to do anything similar to this? Find three unique makers, ask them to come in and redesign and visualize a very iconic product brand. Has anyone else in the footwear business ever tried to do anything quite like this?
Look, I think yes, for sure. I think the uniqueness of this is the time frame, the process, and the process being the story, and the final product being a cast of that story. Now, if you zoom out and you look at the history of sneakers and collaborations, every collaboration had this type of moments at all times. Whether the difference is they were probably not documented and they were not expected to be the story, right? So that is probably the difference.
Because what's interesting is that the charge was to not have everywhere you turn the typical bad idea of the brand and promoting the brand. It was incredibly organic. But that is who the brand is, correct?
Yeah, well, we didn't feel by doing this that we need to be putting in your face at all times, every 15 seconds, a reminder that this is an Adidas film, right? It's pointless. You know, we are a confident enough brand to just by taking people on this journey, and you see at some points who it is, what it is, what shoe, what model, what designer, and in the end, uh, it's brought to you by us. That's enough. It doesn't need to turn into an infomercial.
But
It's
but the
or
infomercial would not have been successful with that sneaker audience. It was that very organic
look,
style of telling the story. That was what was important to the
I
audience,
think
which you were reaching.
opening up the doors this much to the process, exposing this much the process, it's a new thing. Not many brands have done it, right? You have at times exposure to just one moment of this journey. The designer sketching, the designer sitting with the athlete, exchanging the insights, the athlete holding the shoe and thinking that it's cool, or commenting on it that it's not that cool, would love to change. But you know, you don't see the journey, the thinking of what even is the stages of doing something that will end up in the hands of an athlete for him to have a session with you. You know, all these things are behind closed doors. So, you know, we decided to open the doors. It's part of who we are. A brand that drives open source connection with culture, community, design, athletes. It was just give people a longer, deeper, more unique glimpse into the full process.
What's the next project? How do you follow up this? What happens next?
Exactly.
I don't know, you know.
So wait and see.
You know, obviously this inspired us brand-wise, and we will always be very mindful of the memory of it, and the outcome of it. Do we want to repeat it? Probably not. Do we want to try something newer, more daring, because this was done already? There's no desire to turn it into a recipe. What I'm more interested now in, it's in breaking these models and breaking this notion of collective. Bring collectives together to do something completely different. So not sure exactly what's going to be next, but it needs to.
But no matter what you plan to do, the secret of the success, as demonstrated in this project, which I would imagine is definitely going to be consistent with what you guys do next, is that curation of the makers. And that it's not about finding someone and jumping right into it. There is this curation process that gets you to that point where you can feel like that this is definitely going to work. But that, when you talk about the secret in the sauce, it's curation. As we're getting ready to close out the panel here, just want to spend just a little bit more time, because that is a key takeaway that is intrinsic in this project. And I will bet $1 zillion the next project you do that it will continue to evolve. Talk about, so the audience understands how critical it is, this curation of the creative makers.
Not just them, but everybody.
Okay.
Curation for me, it's absolutely critical for any story you want to tell. Even if it's a fantasy story, right? You need to curate properly those that will bring the highest level of fantasy into it. But when you're in a place of reality, of not scripting things, but embracing life as it is, the highs and lows, that authenticity needs to be a component of everything, not just the process. Needs to be, if this is the shoe, what are the designers that make sense to this shoe because they either have lived the generation of a certain moment in time of that shoe that it's relevant, that they bring the memory of those years forward again, and the shoe becomes a canvas for the display of their memory, their stories that are specific to that shoe, or because you want to completely rethink the shoe, and then you pick a designer that does that really well, which is this deconstruction that results once put back together in you still being able to see the shoe that it is, but it's all displaced in the way it was put back together once disassembled. And you need to curate the cultures. Why Shun, for example, from Japan? Because Japan has this amazing passion for history and stories of certain objects, and they are amazing curators of moments in time on a product and craftsmanship level. They have this amazing take into celebrating, preserving culture that I was super curious about it, and so all these things, all the way to making sure that you have the right photographers that make sense, that you curate someone that understands the culture, understands the nature of the story that you're trying to tell. Curation is always going to be the first critical component of whatever you do, that it's successful, right? If you fail at the curation aspect and you land on territories of wrong culture appropriation because you didn't pay attention to the culture, you didn't curate it properly, it's just gonna undermine your project. So it's gonna start losing the authenticity, and it's gonna put you in a place of zero relevancy.
And I think that the last, I want to add that courage is another big piece to it. From my point of view is, I'm often answering a brand brief, but in this situation, what Jose was able to do was create a framework and put all these people inside that frame, and then have the courage to allow that group to go off and create. And that allowed this thing to have a life of its own, quite outside of the brand in a way that this is a story which was actually for its own sake. It became a piece of entertainment that you want to watch, whether you don't need to know that there's any kind of brand alignments in it at all. It's actually a story which is worth looking at. It's 30 minutes really well spent watching that film, where we were allowed to go off and witness this sort of very intense, compelling human journey these guys went on, which got from point A to the very end of the story was the StockX sale in New York, where they were actually able to see what was going on with the product that they created and how the market responded to it and what the kids were saying on the chat streams. All of that stuff was an amazing thing to actually engender and make happen. That framework was the beginning, the brief, the manufacture of that brief, and then having the courage to put that out in the world and let it be its own thing. So yeah, hats off on that basis.
Excellent. Well, as we are at the end of this panel, Drew, shall we just get everyone a final word and then we'll wrap up the panel? Is that okay?
Yes.
So I'd like each of the panelists to give their final word of wisdom to our audience of other brand storytellers who have come here to hear this amazing project and story. Ben, you want to take it? I'll throw it to you. Your final pearl of wisdom for this audience.
Yeah, I mean, it's not often that you get the chance to do something which is really, it's a sort of life experience. And so I'm just grateful to be part of it. And I think that we're all pretty proud of what came of it as well, That's it.
Next.
I think Jose touched on this, and I think for me, curiosity is the number one thing to kind of make sure that you keep as a mindset as you go into any project. because that's really what's going to lead you to newness, and really that simple, and leaving yourself open to fail. Like, I know that that's a very difficult thing to digest and grasp, but you're never going to go somewhere new if you're not open to the idea of being able to fail.
Excellent. Jose, I leave it to you to wrap it all up.
Yeah. If you have done a million things a certain way, make sure the next thing you do, you try to do it in a different way. I think that alongside the aspect of curiosity and the urge to satisfy it, uh, be mindful of the model in which you're embarking to satisfy that curiosity. Make sure that you pay attention to the model, because the model very rapidly becomes a container of limitations for you to satisfy the curiosity that you have. So breaking the models, it's a fundamental aspect of innovation.
Excellent. I'd like to thank the panelists for giving me the privilege to be a part of this truly extraordinary brand storytelling. Thank you. Drew?
Well, thank you, Ty. Thank you for walking us through this and moderating this discussion. And thank you, audience, for joining us. If you're just joining us, or if you missed a portion of this stream, fear not. We'll post it on YouTube later today. You can go to BrandStorytelling.tv/streams to keep up to date and check out all of our previous streams. Thank you so much, panelists. Thank you, Jose. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ibrahim. And thanks to our partners at Picture Farm for bringing this story together. Take care. Be well. Be safe. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Guys.